Recovered picked captures from compliance-era war zones show a recurring silhouette descending through smoke, thermal bloom, and engine wash before the landing zone is fully secure. Surviving Mechanicum records describe a heavy assault craft able to move between void and atmosphere without changing role, while later Legion testimonies treat it as a practical answer to a widening operational problem. Expeditionary fleets needed something more flexible than a pure bomber and less burdensome than the older mass transports that had carried larger formations in earlier campaigns. In damaged manifests, depot logs, and battlefield recollections, the same conclusion appears from different angles. A new craft had entered common service near the end of the Great Crusade, one built not around prestige but around repeated deployment, rapid turnaround, and battlefield utility. That aircraft was the Thunderhawk. Its emergence belongs to the later period of the Great Crusade, when the expansion of the Imperium had already exposed the strain placed upon older assault and transport platforms. The Stormbird remained formidable, but it was larger, more resource-intensive, and less convenient to replace at the scale increasingly demanded by interstellar war. Sources differ slightly in wording, but they agree on the central point. The Thunderhawk was developed late in the Crusade as a more economical and more adaptable successor in active service, filling the space between smaller Legion craft and the great assault carriers that had become expensive liabilities in prolonged conflict. That practical middle ground explains much of its later success. It was not introduced as an ornamental machine or a symbolic flagship. It was introduced because the war machine needed a craft that could be built, armed, repaired, and redeployed in meaningful numbers. This helps explain why early reactions to the Thunderhawk were not uniformly admiring. Some Astartes who had ridden in the first waves of the type considered it lighter and less reassuring than the older Stormbird. One Horus Heresy-era account preserved by research notes that Remus Ventanus of the Ultramarines regarded it as a stopgap, assuming that something better would eventually replace it, or that the legions would return to the heavier pattern they trusted more. That view is revealing. It shows that the Thunderhawk did not begin as an untouchable icon. It began as a compromise perceived by some frontline warriors as slightly too lean for the brutality expected of a primary assault carrier. But the history of Imperial war material is full of machines that outlived the doubts of their first users. The Thunderhawk became one of the clearest examples of that pattern. From the start, its underlying design philosophy was brutally functional. The craft had to descend from orbit, survive hostile atmospheric entry, land or hover near contested ground, deploy troops or cargo quickly, and then either remain as a fire support platform or withdraw for immediate retasking. That demanded a structure with enough mass and protection to endure punishment, but without becoming so enormous that each loss was strategically painful, in the way an older heavy dropship could be. Official and secondary descriptions converge on the same characterization. The Thunderhawk was conceived as a flexible flying craft, one able to operate in atmosphere and in void space while fulfilling multiple battlefield roles without ceasing to be, at heart, an assault transport. That versatility was not decorative. It was the design objective around which the rest of the machine cohered. Its construction reflects that mission priority. The Thunderhawk's hull was engineered less like a conventional aircraft, and more like a compact armoured assault vessel adapted to flight. Research describes a layered structure using an adamantium inner hull, titanium rolled plate, thermoplast fibre mesh, and dual ceramite layers, with the outer protection configured to endure repeated atmospheric entries and resist intense thermal stress. That is a very specific kind of engineering choice. It tells us the craft was never meant to be a delicate aerospace interceptor. It was built for violent transition between combat environments. The armour arrangement also indicates that survivability was not limited to ground fire alone. The Thunderhawk had to tolerate descent, re-entry, debris, heat, and the blunt trauma of warzone insertion. In other words, it was built as a system expected to be used hard and used often. The same principle appears in its propulsion arrangement. The Thunderhawk used 3 RX-9200 Mars pattern combination rocket and afterburning turbofan engines, distributed across the wings and fuselage to support atmospheric flight, heavy lift, and transition to orbital or suborbital operation. In atmosphere, sources place its speed at roughly 2,000 km per hour under suitable conditions, with broader descriptions noting that it could climb to hypersonic velocity during departure from a world and continue into orbital function. Again, the important point is not the headline speed alone. It is the fact that the engine architecture served an aircraft expected to bridge operational layers that are usually separated between craft classes. The Thunderhawk was developed as an orbital dropship that could behave like a transport, a gunship, and an attack craft depending on the need of the moment. That is why it endured. The interior arrangement also shows the priorities of its creators. Even basic descriptions place the flight crew above the forward hold, with pilot, co-pilot, navigator, and gunner integrated into a control environment designed around sensors, communications, and weapon management rather than mere piloting. The transport spaces below were built for rapid embarkation and deployment, with the forward assault ramp becoming central to the Thunderhawk's battlefield identity. This was a craft designed around sequence and timing: approach, suppress, land or hover, open the ramp, disembark under covering fire, extract or reposition, repeat. The architecture of the vehicle was therefore not just about carrying Astartes, it was about carrying them in a way that preserved momentum at the exact moment of violent contact. Construction and internal layout were inseparable from doctrine. Production history adds another layer to its importance. The Thunderhawk was not simply a successful prototype that lingered in a few specialist formations. It entered widespread service and remained there for 10,000 years, an absurdly long lifespan even by Imperial standards, where many machines are revered precisely because they can no longer be reproduced reliably. Multiple sources point to Mars as the originating forge world and identify a long pattern lineage, commonly summarized as patterns 1 through 21. Whether every pattern remained equally available across every era is another question, but the basic implication is clear. The Thunderhawk was not frozen in a single configuration. It was developed, preserved, and iterated upon through a long chain of manufacturing and maintenance traditions, many of them jealously guarded by the Adeptus Mechanicus and chapter artificers. Its longevity also came from scale discipline. The Thunderhawk was large enough to matter and small enough to reproduce. That balance is what turned an initially pragmatic design into a mainstay of Astartes warfare. A craft able to carry up to 30 power-armoured space marines, or a smaller complement of heavier cargo, was substantial, but not so bloated that every deployment became a strategic gamble. Even this transport capacity, which later chapters can examine more fully, matters to the story of development. It meant the Thunderhawk occupied a sweet spot in Imperial military logistics. It could move a meaningful assault force without demanding the industrial burden of a giant carrier every time commanders needed shock troops planetside. Late Crusade planners needed exactly that kind of machine, and the wars that followed proved them right. Over time, its adoption spread beyond one narrow doctrinal niche. Research notes its wide use not only by Space Marine chapters, but also by the Sisters of Battle, which says a great deal about the craft's institutional credibility. Machines that cross organisational boundaries inside the Imperium usually do so because they solve a problem no one can afford to ignore. The Thunderhawk solved several at once. It could insert elite troops with more precision than a drop pod, remain a weapons platform after insertion, cross between ship and surface, and survive the ugly physical demands of repeated warzone use. By the time 10 millennia had passed, it had ceased to be merely a later Great Crusade innovation. It had become part of the visual and logistical grammar of Imperial warfare, instantly legible as a sign that transhuman or other elite Imperial forces were about to arrive in force. Its continued relevance through the Horus Heresy and far beyond also reveals something uncomfortable about Imperial technological culture. The Thunderhawk endured partly because it was good, and partly because the Imperium became less capable, not more, of replacing successful designs with radically better ones. Early Legion skepticism gave way to institutional dependence. What some first considered a compromise matured into an archetype, then into a sacred inheritance. This is a familiar Imperial pattern. The machine that begins as an answer to present-tense logistical needs ends as a relic sustained by doctrine, scarcity, and ritualized maintenance. Yet the Thunderhawk never became obsolete in the pathetic sense of being merely old. It remained useful because its original development target had been real and correctly diagnosed. The requirement for a survivable, multi-role orbital assault craft never went away. There is also a cultural dimension to its development. Astartes warfare places great value on shock, timing, and concentrated violence at decisive points. The Thunderhawk was one of the few aircraft designs that matched those ideals mechanically rather than symbolically. It was not a ceremonial flagship. It was a disciplined tool that allowed elite infantry doctrine to scale across worlds. That is why it appears across so many later depictions and records. Wherever Space Marines had to strike from orbit, move through hostile skies, or redeploy under fire, the logic of the Thunderhawk reasserted itself. Its construction history is therefore not just the history of one gunship, it is the history of an Imperial answer to the problem of how to deliver concentrated elite violence from space to ground without wasting time, overcommitting resources, or trusting fragile machines to do brutal work. By the end of its developmental arc, the Thunderhawk had escaped the category of provisional substitute and entered the far narrower category of designs that become foundational. It outlived the assumptions of those who saw it as temporary. It outlived many rival patterns. It outlived the political order that birthed it. Across the Great Crusade, the Horus Heresy, and the long aftermath that hardened into the Imperium known in later millennia, the aircraft remained in widespread use because its makers had aligned construction with battlefield reality. Later generations inherited the myth. The first builders had dealt in workload, survivability, manufacturability, and operational range. Strip away the iconography, and that is the real beginning of the Thunderhawk. Not legend first, utility first. Legend came later. The external form of the Thunderhawk reflects the same priorities that defined its development, presenting a structure that is immediately recognizable but not ornamental. The fuselage is broad and heavily plated, with a forward cockpit positioned above the main troop compartment, creating a layered silhouette that separates command, transport, and assault functions into stacked operational zones. The wings are short and thick relative to the body, built not for aerodynamic elegance but for lift under extreme load and stability during low-altitude insertion. Twin-tail fins rise from the rear fuselage, stabilizing the craft during atmospheric maneuvering and high-speed descent. This arrangement is not incidental. It supports a vehicle expected to enter contested airspace, remain steady under weapons discharge, and land or hover in environments where turbulence, debris, and hostile fire are all present at once. The most distinctive structural feature remains the forward assault ramp, positioned beneath the cockpit and forming the primary point of troop deployment. This configuration allows embarked forces to disembark directly into the forward arc of engagement, minimizing exposure time and maintaining cohesion during the most vulnerable phase of insertion. The ramp is wide enough to accommodate multiple Space Marines moving in formation, including those equipped with heavier wargear. Its placement also ensures that the Thunderhawk can act as a partial shield during deployment, with its armoured mass absorbing incoming fire while troops advance outward from its front. This is a subtle but important design decision. It transforms the aircraft from a passive carrier into an active component of the assault sequence. The internal volume is divided between troop transport, cargo flexibility, and systems integration. The main hold is capable of carrying approximately 30 fully armoured Space Marines, though configurations vary depending on mission requirements. Alternate loadouts include the transport of a single dreadnought, light vehicles, or combinations of equipment and personnel. The interior is not spacious in a civilian sense, but it is efficient. Restraints, harness systems, and mounting points are arranged to secure occupants during violent maneuvers, atmospheric entry, and evasive flight. The layout reflects a constant assumption of instability. Every element inside the Thunderhawk is designed around the expectation that the craft will be under stress. whether from acceleration, incoming fire, or rapid changes in altitude. Dimensions vary slightly depending on pattern, but consistent records place the Thunderhawk at approximately 26 meters in length, with a wingspan of similar magnitude. Its mass, when fully loaded, reaches levels that would be impractical for conventional atmospheric craft without the specific engine configuration it employs. Despite this, it maintains controlled flight characteristics in both dense and thin atmospheres, indicating a propulsion system capable of delivering sustained thrust well beyond that of standard aerospace transports. Its maximum atmospheric speed is often cited at around 2,000 km per hour, though operational speeds during combat insertion are significantly lower to maintain control and accuracy. The propulsion system is central to its identity as a multi-environment vehicle. The three primary engines, mounted to provide balanced thrust across the fuselage and wings, combine rocket propulsion with afterburning turbofan capability. This dual-mode operation allows the Thunderhawk to function effectively in both atmosphere and near-vacuum conditions. During ascent, the engines can generate sufficient thrust to break atmospheric resistance and transition toward orbital altitude. During descent, they provide controlled deceleration and maneuverability, enabling the craft to adjust its approach vector even under fire. This flexibility is what allows the Thunderhawk to act as a bridge between voidcraft and ground operations without requiring escort or specialized launch infrastructure. Power distribution within the craft supports both propulsion and weapons systems simultaneously, with internal reactors or power cores feeding energy to avionics, targeting systems, defensive fields, and armament. The exact configuration varies between patterns and chapters, but the underlying principle remains consistent. The Thunderhawk must be able to sustain continuous operation across multiple systems without compromising any single function. This is particularly important during extended engagements, where the craft may be required to provide fire support after deploying troops rather than immediately withdrawing. Offensively, the Thunderhawk is equipped to function as a gunship as well as a transport. Its standard armament includes a heavy nose-mounted cannon, typically a turbo-laser destructor or equivalent high-energy weapon, capable of engaging armored targets, fortifications, and enemy aircraft. This forward weapon allows the pilot to suppress threats directly along the flight path, clearing landing zones or disrupting defensive positions before deployment begins. The placement of this weapon reinforces the aircraft's forward-oriented assault doctrine, ensuring that its primary firepower is aligned with its direction of movement. In addition to the nose-mounted weapon, the Thunderhawk carries wing-mounted armaments that may include heavy bolters, lascannons, or missile launchers, depending on the specific configuration. These weapons expand its engagement envelope, allowing it to strike targets on either side of its approach vector or provide covering fire during extraction. Missile systems offer flexibility against both ground and aerial threats, with payloads adaptable to mission requirements. This modularity is an important aspect of its design. It allows chapters and mechanicus forges to tailor the Thunderhawk's offensive profile without altering its core structure. Defensive capabilities are equally significant. The Thunderhawk's armor is among its most defining traits, consisting of layered ceramite and metallic composites engineered to resist ballistic, thermal, and energy-based attacks. This armor is not uniform in thickness. Critical areas such as the cockpit, engine housings, and troop compartments receive additional reinforcement, reflecting the need to protect both crew and payload during high-risk operations. The outer plating is designed to endure not only enemy fire but also the extreme conditions of atmospheric re-entry, where heat and friction would compromise lesser materials. Beyond passive armor, the Thunderhawk is equipped with void shields or energy shielding systems in certain patterns, providing an additional layer of protection against incoming fire. These shields are not invulnerable, but they can absorb or deflect significant amounts of damage, buying time for the craft to complete its mission or withdraw. The integration of shielding with heavy armor creates a layered defense system that increases survivability in environments where sustained exposure to hostile fire is unavoidable. Electronic countermeasures and targeting systems also contribute to its defensive profile. Advanced sensor arrays allow the crew to detect threats at range, track incoming projectiles, and coordinate with allied forces. Countermeasure systems may include flares, chaff, or more advanced Mechanicus-designed interference technologies, depending on the era and pattern. These systems are particularly important during descent and ascent phases, where the Thunderhawk is most exposed to anti-aircraft fire. The durability of the Thunderhawk is further enhanced by redundancy in critical systems. Engine failure, for example, does not necessarily result in immediate loss of the craft, as the remaining engines can compensate to a degree, allowing for controlled withdrawal or emergency landing. Similarly, internal systems are distributed in a way that prevents a single point of failure from disabling the entire vehicle. This approach reflects a broader Imperial engineering philosophy in which reliability is achieved through over-engineering and duplication, rather than precision optimization. One of the most important aspects of its defensive capability is its ability to remain operational after sustaining damage. Accounts across multiple sources describe Thunderhawks continuing to function, despite significant structural compromise including damaged wings, partial engine loss, or hull breaches. This resilience is not accidental. It is the direct result of a design process that prioritized mission completion over structural perfection. The Thunderhawk is expected to take damage. Its systems are therefore built to continue functioning under degraded conditions. In terms of operational flexibility, the Thunderhawk's ability to transition between roles without extensive modification sets it apart from more specialized craft. It can insert troops, provide close air support, evacuate wounded personnel, transport heavy equipment, and engage enemy targets within a single deployment cycle. This reduces the need for multiple aircraft types and simplifies logistical planning for Astartes forces operating far from supply lines. The craft's specifications are therefore not just technical details. They are expressions of a broader strategic requirement for self-sufficiency and adaptability. The cockpit and control systems are designed to support this complexity without overwhelming the crew. Pilots and gunners operate within a highly integrated environment, where targeting, navigation, and communications are linked through advanced cogitator systems. These systems assist in managing the multiple roles the Thunderhawk must perform, allowing the crew to shift between transport, assault, and support functions as the situation evolves. The presence of a dedicated gunner further enhances combat effectiveness, ensuring that weapon systems can be operated independently of flight control. The Thunderhawk's distinctive traits, specifications, and capabilities ultimately converge on a single point. It is a machine built to deliver force precisely where it is needed, under conditions where failure would have immediate and severe consequences. Every aspect of its design, from its armoured hull to its multi-role armament, reflects a consistent emphasis on reliability, survivability, and operational versatility. It does not excel in one narrow function at the expense of others. Instead, it maintains a high level of competence across all required roles, making it one of the most enduring and widely utilised aircraft in the Imperium's arsenal. This balance between offence and defence, between transport and firepower, defines the Thunderhawk's place in Imperial warfare. It is not the fastest craft, nor the most heavily armed in isolation, nor the most heavily armoured when compared to larger vessels. Its strength lies in the integration of these qualities into a single platform that can be deployed repeatedly across a wide range of scenarios. That integration is what transformed it from a late Great Crusade innovation into a persistent element of Imperial military doctrine, and it remains the defining characteristic of the Thunderhawk across 10 millennia of continuous use. The operational effectiveness of the Thunderhawk depends as much on its crew as on its structure and armament. While the craft is heavily automated by Imperial standards, it is not autonomous. It requires a coordinated human and transhuman presence within the cockpit and internal compartments to function at full capacity. Standard configurations identify a pilot, co-pilot, navigator, and gunner as the core flight crew, though exact roles may shift depending on chapter doctrine and the complexity of the mission. Each position exists not as redundancy, but as specialization within a tightly integrated control environment. the pilot maintains primary control over flight dynamics, including atmospheric maneuvering, orbital transition, and landing sequences. This role demands not only technical proficiency, but also the ability to interpret rapidly changing combat conditions. The Thunderhawk is frequently inserted into environments where terrain, weather, and hostile fire combine to create unstable flight conditions. The pilot must therefore manage thrust distribution, vector adjustment, and altitude control while maintaining awareness of threats detected by onboard systems. Unlike civilian or standard military aircraft, the Thunderhawk does not operate within predictable air corridors. It enters contested space by design. The co-pilot supports these functions by managing secondary flight systems and maintaining communication with external units. This includes coordination with orbiting vessels, ground forces, and other aircraft. The co-pilot also monitors system integrity, ensuring that propulsion, shielding, and structural components remain within operational limits. In the event of damage, the co-pilot becomes critical in redistributing system load and maintaining flight stability, while the pilot focuses on navigation and threat avoidance. This division of labour reflects the complexity of the Thunderhawk's operational environment, where no single operator can manage all variables effectively. The navigator provides spatial and tactical awareness, integrating data from sensor arrays, Auspex readings, and pre-mission intelligence. This role becomes especially important during planetary insertion, where atmospheric interference, electronic countermeasures, or environmental hazards may obscure standard navigation methods. The navigator interprets this data to guide the craft toward optimal approach vectors, landing zones, or extraction points. In many cases, the navigator also assists in target designation, feeding information to the gunner and pilot to align offensive actions with mission objectives. The gunner operates the Thunderhawk's primary and secondary weapon systems, managing targeting solutions and weapon discharge independently of flight control. This separation allows the aircraft to maintain offensive pressure while executing complex maneuvers. The gunner's responsibilities include tracking moving targets, adjusting for range and velocity, and coordinating with external fire support when necessary. In high-intensity engagements, the gunner effectively transforms the Thunderhawk into a mobile weapons platform, capable of suppressing enemy positions while the rest of the crew focuses on positioning and deployment. In addition to the primary crew, the Thunderhawk often carries technical personnel or chapter serfs, responsible for maintaining onboard systems during extended operations. These individuals may not be part of the formal flight crew, but their presence ensures that minor faults can be addressed without requiring immediate withdrawal. This reflects a broader Imperial approach to engineering, where continuous maintenance is integrated into operational deployment rather than treated as a separate phase. The nature of the crew also varies depending on the organisation operating the craft. When deployed by Space Marine chapters, the crew may consist of Astartes pilots or highly trained human auxiliaries, depending on chapter tradition. Astartes pilots bring enhanced reflexes, resilience, and situational awareness, allowing them to operate the Thunderhawk under conditions that would overwhelm unaugmented humans. However, even when crewed by humans, the Thunderhawk remains effective due to the integration of cogitator-assisted systems that support decision-making and reduce cognitive load. The use case of the Thunderhawk is defined by its ability to perform multiple roles within a single deployment cycle. Its primary function is the transport and insertion of Space Marines into combat zones, typically from orbiting vessels to planetary surfaces. This insertion can take the form of a direct landing, a hover deployment, or a rapid assault approach where troops disembark under covering fire. The flexibility of these methods allows commanders to adapt to varying battlefield conditions, selecting the approach that minimizes risk while maximizing impact. Once troops have been deployed, the Thunderhawk can transition into a close air support role, using its armament to engage enemy positions, provide covering fire, or disrupt counterattacks. This dual-role capability reduces the need for separate escort or support aircraft, streamlining operational planning and allowing for more rapid response to changing conditions. The Thunderhawk can remain in the combat zone for extended periods, provided it retains sufficient fuel and ammunition, effectively acting as a persistent aerial presence. Extraction operations represent another critical use case. The Thunderhawk's ability to land in contested areas and retrieve personnel or equipment makes it invaluable for recovering forces after mission completion or during emergency withdrawal. This capability is particularly important for Space Marine operations, where the preservation of elite troops is a strategic priority. The craft's durability allows it to operate in environments where lighter vehicles would be unable to survive, ensuring that extraction remains possible even under heavy fire. In addition to troop transport and support, the Thunderhawk is used for logistical operations, including the movement of supplies, equipment, and specialized war gear. Its internal configuration can be adjusted to accommodate different payloads, making it a versatile asset for chapters operating far from established supply lines. This logistical role is often less visible than its combat functions, but it is equally important in sustaining long-term operations. The Thunderhawk also serves as a command and coordination platform in certain scenarios. Its advanced communication systems and sensor arrays allow it to function as an airborne relay point, linking ground forces with orbiting vessels and other units. This capability enhances battlefield awareness and enables more precise coordination between different elements of an Imperial force. While not its primary role, this function underscores the craft's adaptability and the extent to which it can support a wide range of mission profiles. The operational doctrine surrounding the Thunderhawk emphasizes speed, precision, and adaptability. Commanders rely on its ability to deliver forces rapidly, respond to emerging threats, and adjust to changing conditions without requiring significant reconfiguration. This doctrine aligns with the broader strategic principles of Space Marine warfare, where concentrated force and rapid deployment are key to achieving decisive outcomes. The Thunderhawk's long service history provides evidence of its effectiveness across a wide range of conflicts. From the late Great Crusade through the Horus Heresy and into the current era of the Imperium, it has remained a consistent presence in Astartes operations. Its continued use by multiple organizations, including the Sisters of Battle, further demonstrates its reliability and adaptability. Machines that fail to meet operational demands are typically abandoned or replaced, even within the Imperium's conservative technological culture. The Thunderhawk's persistence suggests that it has consistently met or exceeded the requirements placed upon it. This persistence is not without its limitations. The Thunderhawk is not immune to damage, and its loss represents a significant setback for any force that relies on it. Its size and role make it a priority target for enemy forces, particularly during insertion and extraction phases. However, its design mitigates these risks through a combination of armor, shielding, and redundancy, allowing it to survive conditions that would destroy less robust craft. The conclusion that emerges from its design, crew structure, and operational use is straightforward. The Thunderhawk is not defined by any single feature, but by the integration of multiple capabilities into a cohesive system. It combines transport, firepower, durability, and adaptability in a way that supports the demands of Imperial warfare across different environments and time periods. Its development during the Great Crusade addressed a specific set of logistical and tactical challenges, but its continued use reflects a broader alignment with the enduring needs of the Imperium. The problems it was designed to solve did not disappear, and the solutions it provides remain relevant. This continuity is what has allowed the Thunderhawk to persist as a central element of Astartes operations for 10,000 years. In practical terms, the Thunderhawk represents a balance between specialization and versatility. It is specialized enough to perform its primary role effectively, yet versatile enough to adapt to a wide range of secondary functions. This balance is difficult to achieve in any engineered system, particularly one operating under the constraints of Imperial technology and doctrine. The Thunderhawk achieves it through a combination of robust construction, flexible design, and a clear understanding of operational requirements. Across its long history, the Thunderhawk has transitioned from a late Great Crusade innovation to a standardized and widely recognized component of Imperial military infrastructure. Its silhouette is associated with the arrival of elite forces, its engines with the sound of imminent engagement, and its presence with the execution of decisive operations. These associations are not the result of symbolic intent, but of repeated practical use across countless battlefields. The aircraft's enduring relevance ultimately lies in its ability to perform consistently under conditions where failure is not an option. It does not rely on exceptional circumstances or ideal conditions to function. It is built to operate in the environments that define Imperial warfare, where uncertainty, hostility, and resource constraints are constant factors. That consistency, more than any individual specification or capability, defines the Thunderhawk. It is a machine designed to work, to endure, and to deliver results across the full spectrum of its intended roles. In doing so, it has secured a place not only within the operational structure of the Imperium, but within its long-term technological identity. Administratum records compiled during late Crusade compliance actions and early post-heresy reconstruction periods consistently describe the Thunderhawk in terms that prioritize outcome over form. It is not introduced in these documents as an object of reverence, but as a measurable contributor to operational success. Early assessments emphasize reduction in deployment time, increased survivability during insertion, and improved coordination between orbital fleets and ground elements. In comparative summaries, the Thunderhawk is frequently positioned as a stabilizing asset within otherwise volatile assault frameworks, particularly in campaigns where rapid redeployment was required across multiple engagement zones within a single planetary theatre. Mechanicus observational logs from Forger-line detachments expand on this by focusing on repeatability. The Thunderhawk is described as a platform capable of sustaining high operational tempo without requiring full system recalibration between deployments. This is a critical distinction. Many Imperial war machines are powerful, but demand extensive ritualized maintenance after each engagement. The Thunderhawk, while still bound by sacred maintenance protocols, demonstrates a level of resilience that allows it to return to service with reduced downtime. This quality is repeatedly cited in production and deployment reports as a justification for continued pattern preservation and controlled dissemination across chapters. Administratum analysts also note the psychological and strategic impact of Thunderhawk deployment. Reports from compliance theatres indicate that the visible descent of the craft often preceded a measurable shift in enemy behaviour. Hostile forces unfamiliar with Astartes' doctrine frequently misinterpreted the Thunderhawk as a conventional transport, underestimating its integrated firepower and overestimating the time available to respond. This miscalculation created windows of vulnerability that Imperial forces exploited with high consistency. In several recorded engagements, the presence of Thunderhawks in low orbit or atmospheric holding patterns contributed to enemy disorganization even before direct contact was made. Mechanicus evaluations frame this effect in more technical terms. The Thunderhawk is described as a force-multiplying platform, not because of any singular weapon system, but because of its ability to compress multiple operational phases into a single continuous action. Traditional deployment sequences involve separation between transport, fire support, and extraction assets. The Thunderhawk collapses these distinctions, allowing a single craft to insert troops, provide suppression, and reposition without reliance on additional platforms. This consolidation reduces logistical complexity and increases the responsiveness of Imperial forces operating under constrained conditions. Field observations collected from multiple war zones reinforce this assessment. Thunderhawks are frequently deployed in environments where air superiority is contested or where environmental conditions limit the effectiveness of lighter aircraft. In these scenarios, the craft's durability and multi-role capability allow it to operate where other assets would be either ineffective or unsustainable. Administratum summaries describe this as operational persistence, a term used to denote the ability of a unit or platform to remain effective despite adverse conditions. The Thunderhawk consistently meets this criterion across a wide range of recorded engagements. Strategic use findings also highlight the craft's role in maintaining tempo during extended campaigns. In planetary assaults involving multiple phases of engagement, the Thunderhawk enables rapid redeployment of Astartes forces between objectives without requiring a return to orbiting vessels for reorganization. This capability reduces the time between successive strikes and allows commanders to exploit emerging opportunities with minimal delay. Mechanicus data correlates this with increased mission success rates in campaigns where Thunderhawks are deployed in sufficient numbers to sustain continuous operational cycles. Another recurring observation concerns the Thunderhawk's adaptability to varying command doctrines. While its core design remains consistent, its deployment patterns differ between chapters and Imperial organizations. Some favor direct insertion into heavily defended zones, relying on the craft's armor and firepower to absorb initial resistance. Others employ it in more controlled approaches, using its sensor systems and communication capabilities to coordinate with ground forces before committing to a landing. Administratum reports note that this doctrinal flexibility does not diminish the craft's effectiveness. Instead, it enhances its value by allowing it to integrate into diverse operational frameworks without requiring structural modification. Mechanicus records further emphasize the importance of pattern stability in this context. The Thunderhawk's design has remained sufficiently consistent over time to allow for standardized training, maintenance, and deployment procedures across different units. This standardization reduces the cognitive and logistical burden associated with introducing new equipment into established formations. In practical terms, it means that a Thunderhawk assigned to one chapter can be understood and operated by personnel from another with minimal adaptation. This interoperability is rare within the Imperium and is cited as a contributing factor to the craft's widespread adoption. Observations from war zones also document the Thunderhawk's role in casualty management. Its capacity to extract wounded personnel under fire and transport them to medical facilities or orbiting ships contributes to overall force sustainability. Administratum analyses link this capability to improved long-term operational effectiveness as it reduces attrition among elite units. While not its primary function, this role is consistently noted in after-action reports as a secondary benefit that enhances the strategic value of the craft. The craft's presence in combined arms operations is another area of interest. Mechanicus evaluations describe the Thunderhawk as a bridging asset, capable of linking disparate elements of an Imperial force into a cohesive operational structure. Its communication systems allow it to relay information between ground units, orbital command, and other aircraft, effectively acting as a mobile node within a larger network. This function becomes particularly important in environments where standard communication infrastructure is degraded or non-existent. Strategic findings also address the limitations of the Thunderhawk. Administratum reports acknowledge that its size and role make it a priority target for enemy forces equipped with anti-aircraft weaponry or specialized interceptors. In response, deployment protocols often include coordinated support from other units to mitigate this risk. However, even in these scenarios, the Thunderhawk's survivability allows it to fulfill its mission in situations where lighter craft would be unable to operate. This trade-off is recognized as an acceptable cost within the broader strategic framework of Imperial warfare. Mechanicus observations extend this analysis by examining the relationship between the Thunderhawk's design and its long-term viability. The craft's ability to integrate new technologies, such as updated targeting systems or modified weapon configurations, without altering its core structure, is identified as a key factor in its persistence. This modular adaptability allows it to remain relevant despite changes in warfare and technological capability. It also reduces the need for entirely new designs, aligning with the Imperium's tendency to preserve and refine existing patterns rather than pursue radical innovation. Across multiple sources, the Thunderhawk is consistently described as a reliable component of Imperial operations rather than an exceptional or experimental asset. This distinction is important. It indicates that the craft's value lies in its consistency and predictability. qualities that are often more important than raw performance in large-scale military systems. Commanders can plan around the Thunderhawk with confidence, knowing that it will perform as expected under a wide range of conditions. The cumulative impression formed by these observations is one of a machine that has achieved alignment between design intent and operational reality. The Thunderhawk does not rely on favourable circumstances to succeed. It is built to function within the constraints and uncertainties that define Imperial warfare. Its strategic value is therefore not derived from any single capability, but from the way its various functions interact to produce reliable outcomes. In Mechanicus terms, this alignment is sometimes described as harmony between form and function, though such language remains rare in formal documentation. More commonly, the craft is simply noted as efficient, durable, and adaptable. These descriptors, while understated, carry significant weight within the context of Imperial engineering, where many systems are burdened by complexity or constrained by ritual. From the perspective of the administratum, the Thunderhawk represents a successful integration of logistical and tactical requirements. It reduces the need for multiple specialized assets, simplifies deployment planning, and enhances the responsiveness of Imperial forces. These advantages accumulate over time, contributing to its continued use across thousands of campaigns. Taken together, the impressions, observations, and strategic findings recorded by both the Administratum and the Adeptus Mechanicus present a consistent narrative. The Thunderhawk is not defined by novelty or excess. It is defined by its ability to perform its intended role with a high degree of reliability across a wide range of conditions. This reliability, supported by a design that accommodates both stability and adaptation, is what has secured its place within the operational structure of the Imperium. Administratum budgetary records and Mechanicus production ledgers approach the Thunderhawk not as an isolated machine, but as a long-term investment embedded within a broader logistics network. Direct cost figures are rarely preserved in clear numerical form, as Imperial accounting practices often convert material expenditure into abstracted tithe values, labour equivalents, or forge allocation quotas. Even so, cross-referenced reports provide a consistent qualitative conclusion. The Thunderhawk represents a high-value asset, but not an exceptional one when measured against other Astartes-grade war machines. It occupies a middle tier of cost efficiency, more expensive than lighter atmospheric craft, but significantly less burdensome than super-heavy dropships or capital-scale void craft. Mechanicus production notes emphasize material composition as a primary cost driver. The layered construction of adamantium structural framing, ceramite armor plating, and thermoplus fiber reinforcement requires access to specialized forge facilities capable of producing and assembling these materials under controlled conditions. These materials are not uniformly scarce, but their refinement processes are resource-intensive. The forging of ceramite, in particular, involves both technical and ritual components that extend production timelines beyond purely industrial parameters. As a result, Thunderhawk manufacturing is typically centralized within major forge worlds, or chapter-aligned manufactoria with sufficient capacity to maintain consistent output. Labor allocation also contributes to overall construction cost. Unlike mass-produced Imperial Guard vehicles, Thunderhawks require skilled labor at multiple stages of assembly. Mechanicus artisans oversee structural fabrication, engine integration, and systems calibration, often accompanied by prescribed rites to ensure machine spirit stability. This combination of technical expertise and ritual adherence increases production time but is considered necessary to maintain reliability. Administratum summaries note that attempts to accelerate production through reduced oversight have historically resulted in increased failure rates, reinforcing the importance of maintaining established construction protocols. Supply chain considerations extend beyond initial manufacturing. The Thunderhawk's operational lifespan depends on a steady flow of replacement components, fuel, munitions, and maintenance resources. Administratum logistics reports identify several key supply categories. Fuel requirements are significant due to the craft's multi-mode propulsion system, which must support both atmospheric and near-orbital operations. Ammunition resupply varies depending on weapon configuration, but typically includes high-caliber shells, energy cell replacements, and missile payloads. Replacement parts for engines, avionics, and armor plating must be maintained in sufficient quantities to support rapid repair cycles. Mechanicus supply doctrines prioritize standardization within Thunderhawk patterns to reduce logistical complexity. While variations exist, core components are designed to be interchangeable across multiple units, allowing damaged craft to be repaired using parts sourced from different production batches. This modularity reduces downtime and simplifies inventory management, particularly for chapters operating far from primary forge worlds. It also enables field-level repairs in environments where full manufacturing capability is unavailable. Maintenance practices reflect the Imperium's broader approach to technological preservation. The Thunderhawk is subject to regular inspection cycles that combine technical diagnostics with ritualized procedures intended to maintain machine spirit integrity. These procedures include calibration of engine output, verification of structural integrity, and testing of weapon and sensor systems. Maintenance intervals are influenced by operational intensity, with high-frequency deployment requiring more frequent inspection and component replacement. Mechanicus records indicate that the Thunderhawk's design allows for a degree of maintenance flexibility not present in more complex or specialized machines. While certain components require forge-level facilities for repair or replacement, many routine maintenance tasks can be performed by onboard or chapter-based technical personnel. This capability is critical for sustained operations in remote or hostile environments, where access to full Mechanicus support may be limited. Administratum analyses identify this as a key factor in the craft's long-term viability, as it reduces dependence on centralized infrastructure. Supply resilience is further enhanced by the Thunderhawk's tolerance for non-optimal operating conditions. While ideal performance depends on proper maintenance and high-quality components, the craft can continue to function under degraded conditions without immediate failure. This tolerance allows commanders to prioritize mission completion over strict adherence to maintenance schedules, a trade-off frequently observed in prolonged campaigns. However, Mechanicus reports caution that extended operation under such conditions increases the likelihood of cumulative system degradation, necessitating more extensive repair efforts in subsequent maintenance cycles. Strength analysis consistently highlights the Thunderhawk's durability as its most significant advantage. The combination of heavy armor, redundant systems, and robust construction allows it to withstand levels of damage that would incapacitate or destroy lighter craft. This durability translates into higher mission success rates in contested environments, as the Thunderhawk can complete insertion or extraction even under sustained enemy fire. Administratum data correlates this with reduced casualty rates among transported personnel, reinforcing the strategic value of the craft. Another identified strength is its multi-role capability. The Thunderhawk's ability to perform transport, fire support, and logistical functions within a single deployment reduces the need for multiple specialized assets. This consolidation simplifies operational planning and allows for more flexible response to changing battlefield conditions. Mechanicus evaluations describe this as functional integration, a design characteristic that enhances overall efficiency by minimizing redundancy across different vehicle types. Operational persistence is also noted as a strength. The Thunderhawk's capacity to remain in the combat zone after troop deployment, providing ongoing support or repositioning as needed, extends its utility beyond initial insertion. This persistence contributes to sustained pressure on enemy forces and allows for continuous adaptation to evolving tactical situations. Administratum reports indicate that this capability is particularly valuable in engagements where rapid shifts in objective or terrain require immediate redeployment. Weakness analysis, while less frequently emphasized, provides important context for understanding the Thunderhawk's limitations. One of the primary weaknesses identified is its visibility and target profile. The craft's size, heat signature, and operational role make it a high-priority target for enemy anti-aircraft systems and interceptors. During insertion and extraction phases, when the Thunderhawk is operating at lower speeds and altitudes, it is particularly vulnerable to concentrated fire. This vulnerability necessitates careful planning and, in some cases, the use of supporting units to suppress enemy defences prior to deployment. Another limitation is its resource intensity. While more cost-effective than larger dropships, the Thunderhawk still requires substantial investment in materials, labour and maintenance. This limits the number of units that can be produced and maintained by any given chapter or forge world. Administratum records note that losses, while acceptable within certain parameters, cannot be sustained indefinitely without impacting operational capacity. This constraint reinforces the need for careful asset management and prioritization in deployment decisions. Maintenance complexity also represents a potential weakness. Although the Thunderhawk is designed for relative ease of upkeep compared to more advanced machines, it still requires specialized knowledge and equipment to maintain optimal performance. In scenarios where technical support is limited or disrupted, the craft's effectiveness may degrade over time. Mechanicus reports emphasize the importance of maintaining trained personnel and adequate supply reserves to mitigate this risk. Fuel consumption is another factor that influences operational planning. The Thunderhawk's propulsion system, while versatile, demands significant energy input, particularly during atmospheric entry and ascent. This requirement can limit operational range or necessitate additional logistical support in extended campaigns. Administratum analyses suggest that this constraint is manageable within most deployment scenarios, but becomes more significant in environments where resupply is difficult or contested. A further consideration is the balance between versatility and specialization. While the Thunderhawk's multi-role capability is a strength, it also means that it may not match the performance of dedicated platforms in specific functions. For example, specialized attack aircraft may offer greater speed or maneuverability, while dedicated transports may provide higher capacity. The Thunderhawk compensates for these differences through its integrated capabilities, but the trade-off remains a factor in strategic planning. Mechanicus observations also note the risk associated with pattern drift and localized modification. Over time, individual chapters or forge worlds may introduce variations to the Thunderhawk's design, either to enhance performance or to adapt to specific operational needs. While this adaptability is beneficial, it can also lead to inconsistencies in maintenance requirements and component compatibility. Administratum reports highlight the importance of maintaining core pattern integrity to ensure long-term sustainability and interoperability. Despite these limitations, the overall assessment of the Thunderhawk within Administratum and Mechanicus records remains strongly positive. Its strengths are consistently identified as outweighing its weaknesses, particularly in the context of Imperial warfare, where reliability and adaptability are often more valuable than peak performance in isolated metrics. The craft's ability to function effectively across a wide range of scenarios, combined with its manageable production and maintenance requirements, supports its continued use as a standard asset. The relationship between construction cost, maintenance demand, and operational effectiveness ultimately defines the Thunderhawk's position within the Imperial arsenal. It is not the cheapest option, nor the most advanced, but it achieves a balance that aligns with the Imperium's strategic priorities. By combining durable construction with flexible deployment and sustainable maintenance practices, the Thunderhawk provides a level of performance that justifies its resource investment over extended periods. In cumulative analysis, the Thunderhawk emerges as a system optimized not for perfection, but for endurance. Its construction reflects a deliberate allocation of resources towards survivability and versatility, while its maintenance and supply framework ensures that it can remain operational across prolonged campaigns. The identified weaknesses, while significant, are mitigated through doctrine, support, and careful management, allowing the craft to maintain its effectiveness despite inherent limitations. Administratum archives that catalogue fleet actions and planetary compliance campaigns present the Thunderhawk as a constant presence, rather than an isolated highlight. It appears across records of the late Great Crusade, continues through the civil conflict of the Horus Heresy, and persists into the long sequence of wars that define later millennia. its presence is rarely treated as remarkable within these documents. Instead, it is assumed. This alone is a significant indicator. Systems that fail are recorded in detail. Systems that succeed become part of the expected operational baseline. During late Crusade actions, reports describe Thunderhawks operating as primary insertion craft for Legion forces tasked with rapid decapitation strikes. In compliance operations where planetary governments resisted integration, the Thunderhawk enabled simultaneous deployment of multiple Astartes units across key infrastructure points. Administratum summaries note that this distributed insertion capability reduced the duration of initial engagements, often preventing prolonged resistance by disrupting command structures before defensive coordination could be established. The craft's ability to transition directly from orbital deployment to surface assault allowed these operations to occur with minimal warning, a factor repeatedly cited as contributing to successful compliance outcomes. Mechanicus records from the same period focus on performance consistency under variable conditions. Data logs indicate that Thunderhawks maintained operational integrity across a range of atmospheric compositions, gravity levels, and environmental hazards. This adaptability reduced the need for mission-specific vehicle allocation, allowing fleets to standardize around a platform that could function across multiple planetary types. In practical terms, this meant that expeditionary forces could deploy without waiting for specialized craft to be prepared, increasing the speed at which campaigns could be initiated. The Horus Heresy provides a more complex set of observations. Administratum and Mechanicus records from this period are fragmented, often contradictory, and occasionally corrupted. Despite this, a consistent pattern emerges. Thunderhawks were used extensively by both loyalist and traitor forces, indicating that their utility was recognized across opposing doctrines. Engagement reports describe Thunderhawks performing insertion, extraction, and fire support roles in urban, orbital, and void-adjacent environments. In several recorded battles, the craft is noted for its ability to continue operating, despite sustaining damage that would have grounded other vehicles. One frequently referenced characteristic during Heresy-era engagements is the Thunderhawk's role in contested airspace. Administratum summaries describe scenarios in which air superiority was not established, yet Thunderhawks were deployed regardless. In these conditions, the craft's durability and armament allowed it to survive long enough to complete mission objectives, even when subjected to sustained anti-aircraft fire. Mechanicus analysis interprets this as evidence of design resilience, noting that the Thunderhawk's construction allows it to function as both transport and combat platform in environments where the distinction between these roles becomes irrelevant. Post-Heresy records, particularly those associated with chapter deployments, continue to document the Thunderhawk's presence across a wide range of conflicts. In siege operations, the craft is used to insert forces into fortified positions, often under direct fire from entrenched defenses. Administratum reports indicate that the Thunderhawk's ability to deliver troops directly into contested zones reduces the need for prolonged preliminary bombardment, preserving infrastructure that may be of strategic value. In open-field engagements, it serves as a mobile reserve platform, capable of redeploying units to exploit weaknesses in enemy lines. Mechanicus logs from these periods emphasize maintenance performance under sustained operational tempo. Data collected from extended campaigns shows that Thunderhawks can maintain functional status across multiple deployment cycles, with only incremental maintenance provided that critical systems are monitored and serviced according to established protocols. This capability supports continuous operations, allowing forces to maintain pressure on enemy positions without significant interruption. Vehicle effectiveness is consistently evaluated in relation to mission success rates and resource expenditure. Administratum analyses compare Thunderhawk deployments with those of alternative transport and support platforms, noting that while the craft does not achieve the highest performance metrics in any single category, it delivers above-average results across all measured parameters. This balanced performance is identified as a key factor in its widespread adoption. The Thunderhawk does not require ideal conditions to function effectively, and it does not impose excessive logistical demands relative to its output. Mechanicus evaluations approach effectiveness from a systems perspective, examining the interaction between the Thunderhawk's components and its operational environment. These evaluations highlight the integration of propulsion, armor, and armament as a defining feature. The craft's ability to maintain flight stability while engaging targets and deploying troops is identified as a complex systems achievement, requiring precise coordination between mechanical and cogitator-controlled elements. This integration is not easily replicated in other platforms, contributing to the Thunderhawk's continued relevance. Battle records also provide insight into the craft's limitations. Administratum reports acknowledge instances where Thunderhawks were lost to concentrated enemy fire, particularly in engagements involving advanced anti-aircraft systems or specialized interceptors. These losses are typically associated with scenarios where deployment protocols were compromised or where enemy capabilities exceeded anticipated thresholds. Despite this, the overall loss rate remains within acceptable parameters when measured against mission success. Mechanicus analysis of these incidents often focuses on failure modes, identifying common points of vulnerability such as engine housings, wing joints, and sensor arrays. These findings inform ongoing maintenance and reinforcement practices, contributing to incremental improvements in durability and survivability. The ability to learn from operational data and apply these lessons to existing patterns is a notable aspect of the Thunderhawk's long-term evolution. Another dimension of effectiveness is the craft's impact on operational planning. Administratum records indicate that the availability of Thunderhawks influences strategic decision-making at multiple levels. Commanders are more likely to pursue rapid insertion tactics when reliable transport and support platforms are available, leading to a preference for aggressive, high-tempo operations. This shift in doctrine is not solely attributable to the Thunderhawk, but its capabilities enable and reinforce such approaches. Mechanicus observations extend this analysis by examining the relationship between the Thunderhawk and other elements of the Imperial war machine. The craft is described as a connective asset, linking void-based operations with surface engagements and facilitating coordination between different unit types. This role enhances overall system efficiency, as it reduces the friction associated with transitioning between operational domains. Across recorded wars, the Thunderhawk's effectiveness is not defined by isolated victories or singular achievements. Instead, it is reflected in its consistent contribution to a wide range of engagements. It is present in successful operations not as a decisive factor on its own, but as a reliable component within a larger system. This distinction is important. It indicates that the Thunderhawk's value lies in its ability to support and enhance the effectiveness of other units, rather than dominate the battlefield independently. Administratum conclusions drawn from long-term data emphasize this point. The Thunderhawk is categorized as a force enabler, a platform that increases the efficiency and effectiveness of Astartes and other Imperial forces by providing reliable transport, fire support, and logistical flexibility. Its contribution is measured not only in direct combat outcomes, but in the cumulative impact on campaign duration, resource utilization, and force sustainability. Mechanicus conclusions align with this assessment, framing the Thunderhawk as a stable and adaptable system within a dynamic operational environment. Its design allows for incremental modification and integration of new technologies, without requiring fundamental changes to its structure. This adaptability supports its continued use across evolving warfare conditions, ensuring that it remains compatible with other elements of the Imperial arsenal. The combined perspective of the Administratum and the Adeptus Mechanicus presents a consistent narrative. The Thunderhawk is not an experimental or exceptional vehicle. It is a standardized, reliable platform that fulfills its intended role with a high degree of consistency. Its presence across multiple wars and eras reflects not only its initial design success, but its capacity to adapt and endure within the constraints of Imperial technology and doctrine. In conclusion, the Thunderhawk's record across wars and battles demonstrates a sustained alignment between design, deployment, and outcome. It performs its functions without requiring ideal conditions, integrates effectively with other systems, and maintains operational viability over extended periods. These qualities, supported by manageable construction and maintenance demands, define its effectiveness within the Imperial war machine. From the perspective of both the Administratum and the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Thunderhawk represents a successful balance between capability and sustainability. It is a machine that continues to justify its existence through consistent performance, reinforcing its position as a central element of Imperial military operations across 10 millennia of conflict. Inquisition archive entries that reference the Thunderhawk rarely begin with technical specification or doctrinal analysis. Instead, they begin with patterns, repeated sightings across unrelated theatres, consistent survival under statistically improbable conditions, and irregularities in loss reports form the foundation of early investigative interest. Unlike Administratum and Mechanicus records, which prioritise function and output, Inquisition documentation is concerned with deviation. The Thunderhawk draws attention not because it fails, but because it performs too consistently within environments where variance is expected. Early Ordo Hereticus transcripts compiled during post-heresy reconstruction efforts note discrepancies between reported Thunderhawk losses and confirmed wreckage recovery. In several cases, craft recorded as destroyed were later re-identified in separate campaigns, with minimal structural variation. Administratum clerks attributed these inconsistencies to record duplication or clerical error, but Inquisition analysts flagged the pattern for further review. While no definitive conclusion was reached, the repeated reappearance of identical or near-identical craft signatures introduced the possibility of undocumented recovery or reconstruction processes operating outside standard Mechanicus oversight. Observations from Ordo Xenos detachments expand on this uncertainty by examining Thunderhawk performance in environments influenced by non-Imperial technologies. Reports from engagements involving Xenos anti-aircraft systems indicate that Thunderhawks occasionally demonstrate resistance profiles inconsistent with recorded armor specifications. In some instances, energy dispersion patterns observed during impact events do not align with known ceramite or shielding characteristics. These anomalies are not consistent across all units, suggesting that they may be linked to localized modifications or undocumented upgrades rather than inherent design features. Ordo Malleus records approached the Thunderhawk from a different angle, focusing on its interaction with warp-influenced environments. In several documented incursions into regions of high warp activity, Thunderhawks have maintained operational stability beyond expected tolerances. Standard Imperial doctrine acknowledges that most machines experience degraded performance in such conditions due to interference with navigational and cogitator systems. However, certain Thunderhawk units have been observed to retain functional coherence, completing insertion and extraction sequences without the system failures typically associated with warp proximity. This has led to speculation regarding the presence of reinforced machine spirits or enhanced sanctification rituals applied during construction or maintenance. Inquisition impressions of the Thunderhawk are therefore shaped by a combination of reliability and irregularity. On one hand, the craft behaves as expected within the majority of recorded engagements, fulfilling its role with predictable efficiency. On the other hand, isolated instances of anomalous performance introduce variables that cannot be fully explained by existing Mechanicus doctrine. This duality complicates efforts to categorize the Thunderhawk within standard investigative frameworks. Conspiracy findings within Inquisition archives are cautious in tone, often framed as hypotheses rather than conclusions. One recurring theory suggests that certain Thunderhawk patterns may incorporate relic technologies dating back to the late Great Crusade or earlier. These technologies, potentially preserved through incomplete or misunderstood standard template construct fragments, could account for variations in performance and durability. The absence of comprehensive documentation for early Thunderhawk development supports this possibility, though it remains unconfirmed due to the fragmented nature of surviving records. Another line of inquiry examines the role of chapter-specific modifications. Inquisition agents have documented cases where individual chapters apply extensive alterations to their Thunderhawks, integrating unique weapon systems, armor configurations, or internal systems. While such modifications are not inherently suspicious, the lack of centralized oversight raises the possibility of divergence from approved design parameters. In extreme cases, these alterations may approach or exceed the boundaries of what is considered acceptable within Imperial technological doctrine, particularly if they involve experimental or unverified components. There are also indications of restricted Mechanicus involvement in certain Thunderhawk production and maintenance cycles. Inquisition records reference forge facilities operating under sealed mandates, where access to design schematics and production data is limited to specific magi or forge hierarchies. These restrictions complicate efforts to trace the origin and modification history of individual craft. While such secrecy is not unusual within the Adeptus Mechanicus, it introduces additional uncertainty when combined with observed performance anomalies. Field observations collected by Inquisition operatives further contribute to the perception of the Thunderhawk as a platform of interest. In several engagements, Thunderhawks have been recorded operating beyond standard deployment parameters, including extended atmospheric loiter times, unconventional insertion vectors, and rapid redeployment sequences that exceed typical logistical expectations. While these actions can often be attributed to skilled crew or favourable conditions, their recurrence across multiple theatres suggests that additional factors may be influencing performance. The psychological impact of the Thunderhawk is also noted within Inquisition reports, though not in the same manner as administratum analyses. Rather than focusing on enemy perception, Inquisition observations consider the effect on Imperial personnel. The craft's reputation for reliability and resilience can lead to overconfidence among operators and commanders, potentially resulting in riskier deployment decisions. In some cases, this confidence is reinforced by anecdotal accounts of Thunderhawk surviving extreme conditions, creating a feedback loop in which perceived invulnerability influences tactical behavior. Inquisition analysts are particularly attentive to this phenomenon, as it introduces the possibility of doctrinal drift. If the Thunderhawk is treated as more capable than it actually is, operational planning may begin to rely on assumptions that are not universally valid. This concern is reflected in several advisory reports recommending that Thunderhawk deployment protocols remain aligned with established parameters, regardless of individual performance records. Another area of interest involves the machine spirit associated with the Thunderhawk. While all Imperial machines are believed to possess some form of machine spirit, Inquisition records note that Thunderhawks often exhibit behavioral characteristics that suggest a higher degree of responsiveness or stability. Pilots and crew have reported instances of systems compensating for damage or environmental interference in ways that exceed standard cogitator programming. These reports are difficult to verify, as they rely on subjective accounts rather than measurable data, but their frequency has led to speculation regarding the nature of the Thunderhawk's internal systems. Some Inquisition documents propose that these observations may be the result of advanced machine spirit conditioning or prolonged ritual reinforcement, particularly in craft that have seen extensive service. Over time, repeated maintenance rites and operational cycles may contribute to a form of emergent system behavior that enhances performance under stress. While this concept remains speculative, it aligns with broader Imperial beliefs regarding the interaction between technology and ritual. There are also more controversial theories, though these are typically restricted to sealed archives. One such theory suggests that certain Thunderhawk units may have been exposed to warp phenomena during their operational history, resulting in subtle alterations to their systems. These alterations could manifest as increased resilience or irregular performance characteristics. However, the lack of consistent evidence and the inherent difficulty of studying warp influence on machine systems limit the credibility of this hypothesis. Inquisition observations ultimately converge on a cautious assessment. The Thunderhawk is recognized as a highly reliable and effective platform, but one that exhibits occasional anomalies that warrant continued monitoring. These anomalies are not sufficient to classify the craft as a threat or deviation, but they introduce variables that cannot be fully explained within current understanding. From an investigative standpoint, the Thunderhawk represents a case study in the intersection of standardization and variation. Its widespread use and consistent design suggest a stable technological foundation, while localized modifications and undocumented factors introduce elements of unpredictability. This combination makes it both a dependable asset and a subject of ongoing interest. In conclusion, the Inquisition perspective on the Thunderhawk is defined by vigilance rather than suspicion. The craft is not viewed as inherently problematic, but its performance characteristics and modification potential require periodic review. Its role within Imperial operations is too significant to ignore, and any deviation from expected behavior, however minor, is treated as a potential point of inquiry. This approach reflects the broader mandate of the Inquisition, which seeks to identify and address risks before they manifest as threats. In the case of the Thunderhawk, this means maintaining awareness of its capabilities, monitoring for anomalies, and ensuring that its continued use aligns with the stability and security of the Imperium. Inquisition interrogative records concerning the Thunderhawk rarely focus on the machine in isolation. Instead, they examine the relationship between the craft, its operators, and the environments in which it is deployed. Interrogations conducted by Ordo Hereticus and Ordo Malleus agents often begin with standard procedural questioning regarding mission parameters, maintenance history, and crew conduct. However, these sessions frequently expand into more detailed examinations of perceived irregularities, particularly when Thunderhawk units are associated with engagements involving anomalous conditions or unexplained outcomes. Crew testimonies form a significant portion of these records. Pilots, gunners, and technical personnel are questioned regarding system behavior during high-stress operations. In multiple cases, individuals describe instances where the Thunderhawk maintained stability despite damage or interference that would typically result in loss of control. These accounts often include references to control inputs being supplemented or corrected without direct operator command, suggesting a level of system autonomy beyond standard cogitator assistance. While such claims are difficult to verify through mechanical inspection alone, their recurrence across unrelated interrogations has led Inquisition analysts to treat them as data points rather than isolated anomalies. Technical interrogation of Mechanicus personnel provides a different perspective. Magi and engine seers responsible for Thunderhawk maintenance are questioned regarding calibration procedures, component replacement, and any deviations from established rights. In several documented cases, these individuals acknowledge minor adjustments made to improve performance or compensate for wear. Such modifications are typically within acceptable parameters, but the cumulative effect of incremental changes over extended service periods introduces variability between individual craft. Inquisition analysts note that while no single modification appears significant, the aggregation of these changes may contribute to the performance discrepancies observed in field reports. Anomaly reports compiled from multiple ordos highlight specific categories of irregular behavior. One category involves resilience anomalies, where Thunderhawks continue to operate after sustaining damage that exceeds documented tolerance thresholds. These reports often include detailed descriptions of structural compromise, engine degradation, or partial system failure, followed by continued functionality sufficient to complete mission objectives. In some instances, post-engagement inspection reveals damage levels that would normally result in catastrophic failure. Mechanicus explanations typically attribute these outcomes to redundancy and conservative engineering margins, but Inquisition analysts consider the possibility that additional factors may be influencing system behavior. Another category involves sensor and communication irregularities. Thunderhawks operating in environments with high electromagnetic interference or warp proximity have been observed maintaining communication links and sensor clarity beyond expected limits. Interrogations of crew members in these scenarios often reveal no awareness of abnormal system performance during the engagement itself. This lack of perception complicates analysis, as it suggests that any compensatory mechanisms are operating at a level not directly visible to operators. Mechanicus personnel questioned on these findings generally reference advanced cogitator filtering and signal processing. though they acknowledge that performance under such conditions can vary. A third category concerns temporal inconsistencies in deployment records. In rare cases, mission logs indicate discrepancies between recorded deployment times and external observations. These discrepancies are typically minor, measured in seconds or minutes, but they appear across multiple engagements involving Thunderhawks operating near warp disturbances. Inquisition investigators approach these findings with caution, recognizing the potential for data corruption or synchronization errors. However, the pattern has prompted limited investigation into the interaction between Thunderhawk systems and localized temporal distortion. Beneficial findings identified through these interrogations emphasize the Thunderhawk's capacity to exceed baseline expectations under adverse conditions. Inquisition analysts acknowledge that the craft's resilience and adaptability contribute positively to mission outcomes, particularly in environments where other assets would be compromised. The ability to maintain operational status despite damage or interference enhances force survivability and supports the completion of critical objectives. These benefits are not theoretical. They are consistently reflected in after-action reports and corroborated by multiple sources. The Thunderhawk's integration of systems also yields advantages in information processing and coordination. Interrogative findings indicate that the craft's communication and sensor arrays can function as effective relay points, even when primary command infrastructure is degraded. This capability allows Inquisition operatives and Imperial forces to maintain situational awareness in conditions that would otherwise result in operational isolation. From an Inquisition perspective, this function is particularly valuable during investigations involving heretical or anomalous activity, where reliable information flow is essential. However, detrimental findings are also documented with equal attention. One of the primary concerns identified by Inquisition analysts is the potential for unregulated modification. While chapter-specific adjustments and Mechanicus calibrations are expected, the absence of centralized oversight creates an environment in which deviations can accumulate without comprehensive documentation. Interrogations of technical personnel occasionally reveal uncertainty regarding the full configuration of specific Thunderhawk units, particularly those that have undergone multiple repair cycles across different facilities. This lack of clarity complicates efforts to assess risk and ensure compliance with Imperial standards. Another detrimental factor involves the psychological impact of perceived reliability. As noted in previous observations, the Thunderhawk's reputation for resilience can influence operator behavior. Interrogative records include instances where pilots and commanders admit to engaging in higher-risk maneuvers based on confidence in the craft's durability. While such decisions may lead to successful outcomes, they also increase the likelihood of loss if the craft's limits are exceeded. Inquisition analysts view this tendency as a form of operational bias, one that must be managed through doctrine and oversight. Machine spirit behavior remains a point of ongoing concern. While enhanced responsiveness is generally beneficial, it introduces an element of unpredictability that is difficult to quantify. Interrogations of engine seers occasionally reveal divergent interpretations of machine spirit activity, with some attributing anomalous performance to proper ritual adherence, and others suggesting that prolonged service may alter system behavior in ways not fully understood. The Inquisition does not dismiss these explanations, but it treats them as incomplete, recognizing that they rely on a combination of technical knowledge and doctrinal belief. More speculative, detrimental findings involve the possibility of external influence on Thunderhawk systems. While no confirmed cases of corruption or hostile takeover have been documented, the craft's operation in warp-adjacent environments raises questions about susceptibility to non-physical interference. Interrogations conducted by the Order Malleus include targeted questioning on this subject, particularly in cases where anomalies coincide with known warp disturbances. To date, these investigations have not produced conclusive evidence, but the absence of confirmation does not eliminate the possibility of risk. An additional concern relates to data integrity. The Thunderhawk's role as a mobile communication and coordination platform means that it processes and transmits significant volumes of information during operations. In environments where data corruption is possible, whether through technological interference or anomalous phenomena, the accuracy of this information becomes critical. Inquisition reports highlight the need for verification protocols to ensure that data relayed through Thunderhawk systems remains reliable. Despite these concerns, the overall assessment of the Thunderhawk within Inquisition, interrogative findings remains balanced. The craft is recognized as a highly effective and generally reliable asset, with anomalies that are noteworthy but not inherently indicative of systemic failure or corruption. The presence of both beneficial and detrimental findings reflects the complexity of its operational environment and the cumulative effects of long-term use. In conclusion, the Inquisition perspective on the Thunderhawk, as derived from interrogative findings and anomaly reports, is characterized by cautious acceptance. The craft's advantages in resilience, adaptability, and system integration are acknowledged as significant contributions to Imperial operations. At the same time, the potential risks associated with modification, operator behavior, and unexplained anomalies necessitate ongoing monitoring and investigation. This balanced approach ensures that the Thunderhawk continues to serve its intended role, while remaining subject to scrutiny appropriate for a system of its importance. The Inquisition does not seek to restrict its use, but to understand its behavior in full, ensuring that any deviations from expected performance are identified and addressed before they develop into broader concerns within the Imperium. Inquisition priority briefs that reference the Thunderhawk shift in tone from observation to containment logic. The craft is not classified as a threat, yet its scale of use and the accumulation of minor irregularities elevate it into a category requiring periodic escalation review. Urgent findings do not originate from a single catastrophic event, but from convergence. Across separate ordos, across different theatres, the same small deviations recur often enough to justify formal attention. These are not failures, they are edge behaviours that appear at the limits of expected function. One recurring urgent finding concerns undocumented variance between nominal pattern specifications and fielded configurations. Inquisition audits of selected chapter fleets have identified Thunderhawk units whose internal schematics do not fully match any archived Mechanicus pattern lineage. The discrepancies are not immediately dangerous. They appear as altered power routing, modified shielding thresholds, or reconfigured avionics hierarchies. However, the lack of traceable authorization introduces a structural blind spot. Without a verifiable chain of modification, the origin of these changes cannot be confidently attributed to sanctioned Mechanicus practice. This creates a condition in which deviation exists without accountability. Follow-up interrogations of associated engineers and artificers rarely yield malicious intent. Most describe incremental adjustments made over extended service periods, often to compensate for component wear or to optimize performance under recurring mission profiles. The issue identified by the Inquisition is not the modification itself, but the absence of centralized reconciliation. Over time, multiple small changes can produce a system that behaves differently from its original design, while still appearing externally compliant. This phenomenon is categorized as cumulative divergence, and it is treated as a long-term risk factor rather than an immediate fault. A second urgent finding involves machine spirit response patterns during high-stress engagements. While earlier reports noted enhanced responsiveness as a beneficial trait, deeper analysis reveals inconsistency in how this responsiveness manifests. In some Thunderhawks, system compensation aligns precisely with operator intent, stabilizing flight or optimizing weapon output. In others, similar compensation introduces slight deviations in control feedback or targeting alignment. These differences are often subtle and do not prevent mission completion, but they indicate variability in internal system behavior that cannot be fully explained by standard cogitator logic. Inquisition analysts do not attribute this variability to corruption. Instead, it is classified as emergent behavior within long-served machine systems. The concern arises from unpredictability at scale. A single craft exhibiting minor deviation is manageable. A fleet of such craft, each with unique behavioral patterns, introduces complexity that may exceed the ability of operators to anticipate and control under extreme conditions. This risk is amplified in coordinated operations where multiple Thunderhawks must function in synchronization. Warp-adjacent anomaly correlation represents another area of elevated concern. While previous findings identified instances of stable operation in warp-influenced environments, more recent cross-referenced reports suggest a pattern of residual effects following such deployments. These effects do not present as immediate system failure. Instead, they appear as slight irregularities in sensor calibration, timing synchronization, or power fluctuation during subsequent missions. The delay between exposure and manifestation complicates detection and attribution. Interrogative follow-ups indicate that crew members often remain unaware of these changes as they fall within operational tolerance thresholds. However, when aggregated across multiple systems, these minor deviations can influence overall performance. Inquisition classification for this phenomenon remains provisional, but it is treated as a potential vector for gradual system drift linked to environmental exposure rather than internal modification. Warning signs identified in conjunction with these findings focus on early indicators of deviation rather than confirmed faults. One such indicator is inconsistency in maintenance ritual outcomes. Engineers report cases where standard rites yield variable system responses, requiring repeated calibration to achieve expected results. While not uncommon in aging machinery, the frequency of such occurrences in certain Thunderhawk units exceeds baseline expectations. This suggests that internal system states may be diverging from known calibration models. Another warning sign involves discrepancies between pilot input and recorded system response during post-mission analysis. Flight data logs occasionally show micro-adjustments in thrust vectoring or control surface alignment that were not directly commanded by the operator. These adjustments are typically beneficial, contributing to stability or efficiency, but their origin remains unclear. Inquisition analysts emphasize that beneficial outcomes do not negate the need for traceability. Unattributed system behavior, regardless of result, represents a point of uncertainty. Communication integrity also emerges as a monitored factor. While Thunderhawks generally maintain strong signal performance, certain units exhibit irregular signal propagation characteristics under specific conditions. These irregularities do not result in complete communication loss, but they can alter signal timing or clarity in ways that affect coordination. In high-tempo operations, even minor communication discrepancies can influence decision-making and response time. The cumulative effect of these warning signs is not immediate degradation, but increased complexity in predicting system behavior. The Thunderhawk remains operationally effective, but the margin between expected and actual performance becomes less defined as variables accumulate. From an Inquisition perspective, this erosion of predictability is the primary concern. Imperial doctrine relies on consistency. When consistency becomes conditional, oversight must increase. Urgent procedural recommendations derived from these findings do not advocate restriction of Thunderhawk deployment. Instead, they focus on containment through awareness and documentation. Inquisition directives emphasize the importance of comprehensive modification tracking, even for minor adjustments. They also recommend enhanced post-deployment analysis for units operating in anomalous environments, with particular attention to delayed system effects. Cross-order coordination has also been proposed to consolidate anomaly data. By aggregating reports from Hereticus, Malleus, and Xenos investigations, analysts aim to identify patterns that may not be visible within isolated datasets. This approach reflects a shift from reactive investigation to proactive monitoring, recognizing that the Thunderhawk's scale of use necessitates a broader analytical framework. Despite the presence of these urgent findings and warning signs, the final assessment remains controlled. The Thunderhawk is not classified as compromised, unstable, or unreliable. It continues to perform its intended functions with a high degree of effectiveness across a wide range of operational scenarios. The anomalies identified are incremental and distributed, lacking the concentration or severity required to justify escalation beyond monitoring protocols. The conclusion reached by the Inquisition is therefore one of managed confidence. The Thunderhawk is accepted as a critical component of Imperial operations, but one that operates within a complex and evolving system of variables. Its strengths in durability, adaptability, and integration remain intact. Its weaknesses, as identified through cumulative analysis, are not failures, but areas of uncertainty that require continued observation. This conclusion aligns with the broader Inquisition mandate. Absolute certainty is neither expected nor required. What is required is awareness of deviation, understanding of potential risk, and the capacity to respond before isolated irregularities develop into systemic issues. The Thunderhawk in this context represents a stable platform operating at the edge of long-term variation, a machine whose continued success depends not only on its design, but on the vigilance applied to its use. In final assessment, the Thunderhawk endures not because it is flawless, but because its imperfections are contained within acceptable limits. It remains a reliable instrument of Imperial power, supported by a framework of oversight that acknowledges both its strengths and its uncertainties.